You're all welcome to today's deep news analysis, real, direct, and made for Nigerians who want clarity, not noise. If you're new here, subscribe now and turn on your notification bell. On this channel, we break things down calmly, clearly, and without fear. Now let's go straight to it. Nigeria was shaken on November 20th when Nnamdi Kanu was sentenced to life imprisonment and later moved to Sokoto prison. That date did not pass quietly. It did not feel ordinary. It felt heavy. Across political circles, legal communities, and social spaces, conversations changed tone immediately. The judgment was not just another court decision. It was a moment that many Nigerians believed would shape the country's direction for years. For some, the sentence was a strong statement by the state, a sign that authority would not bend. For others, it was deeply troubling. They saw it as the peak of a long and controversial legal battle. But whether people agreed or disagreed, one fact remained clear: the decision carried national weight. The life sentence closed one chapter of the case. But it also opened new questions. Then came something unexpected. Reports began to circulate that Justice James Omotosho made a shocking revelation. According to those reports, he acknowledged that there were errors in his judgment. Not small technical errors. Not minor slips. He reportedly said the errors were connected to pressure from undisclosed individuals. Pressure. That single word changed the atmosphere. Because in a case of this magnitude, pressure means something serious. It suggests influence. It suggests interference. It suggests that the legal process may not have been as independent as Nigerians hope it should be. If a judge admits that external pressure affected a ruling, that is not a light matter. It touches the foundation of the judicial system. Courts are meant to stand firm, especially when cases are sensitive and political. Judges are expected to apply the law without fear or favor. That is the standard. So when the same judge reportedly says there were errors because of pressure, it creates a new wave of tension. What kind of pressure? From whom? At what stage? And how deep did it go? These are not emotional questions. They are serious constitutional concerns. The case of Nnamdi Kanu has always carried political weight. It has regional implications. It has security implications. It has international attention. Every court appearance drew strong reactions. Every legal motion was examined closely. When the life imprisonment sentence was delivered, it signaled finality. It suggested that the legal battle had reached its most severe outcome. Moving him to Sokoto prison reinforced that sense of closure. The state had acted decisively. Now, with reports of admitted errors, that sense of closure no longer feels solid. If the judgment contained errors influenced by pressure, then the integrity of the decision comes into question. Not just morally, but legally. The judiciary survives on trust. Once trust begins to crack, the consequences spread quickly. People begin to doubt not only one ruling but the system itself. And in a country where political tension already exists, doubt can grow very fast. It is also important to approach this carefully. Allegations and reported statements must be verified through proper legal channels. But even the possibility of such an admission forces a national conversation. Was due process fully followed? Were all legal standards strictly applied? Did external forces attempt to shape the outcome? These are the questions now moving through Nigeria's political and legal space. An admission of error, especially in a case that led to life imprisonment, carries weight beyond personal regret. It suggests that something may have gone wrong at a structural level. And when a judge asks for forgiveness, as reported, that introduces another layer. It signals awareness. It signals reflection. But in legal matters, reflection alone is not enough. Correction must follow. This moment is delicate. On one side, there is the need to protect the credibility of the judiciary. On the other side, there is the responsibility to ensure that justice is not compromised. Nigeria now finds itself watching closely. Legal experts are analyzing. Political observers are cautious. Supporters and critics alike are waiting for clarity. Because if there were errors under pressure, the implications are wide. And if there were no errors, then clarity must come quickly to prevent further uncertainty. What is certain is this: the November 20th life sentence was a defining moment. But the reported revelation has introduced a new phase, one that may prove even more consequential than the judgment itself. Let us examine this from a calm and structured perspective. When a judge reportedly admits that there were errors in a judgment due to pressure, the issue immediately shifts from one individual case to the integrity of the entire judicial process. The focus is no longer only on Nnamdi Kanu as a defendant. The focus becomes the strength and independence of Nigeria's institutions. The judiciary is expected to operate without interference. That expectation is not symbolic. It is constitutional. Courts are meant to serve as a shield against undue influence, whether political, security-related, or institutional. When pressure enters the conversation, it suggests that the shield may not have been fully intact. This is why the reported revelation is significant. If external pressure affected the ruling, then it raises serious procedural concerns. Judicial decisions must be based on evidence presented in court, arguments from both prosecution and defense, and strict interpretation of the law. Any influence outside that framework challenges the credibility of the outcome. In cases that carry national security and political weight, the pressure on institutions can be intense. The case involving Nnamdi Kanu was not an ordinary criminal proceeding. It carried deep political meaning. It attracted international attention. It touched on regional sensitivities and national unity. Under such circumstances, the judiciary faces enormous scrutiny. However, scrutiny is not the same as pressure. Scrutiny is public observation. Pressure implies direct or indirect attempts to shape a decision. If the reported statement is accurate, then several legal implications follow. First, there may be grounds for appeal or judicial review. An acknowledgement of errors linked to pressure could be used as a basis to challenge the validity of the life imprisonment sentence delivered on November 20th. The appellate courts would then need to determine whether the errors materially affected the outcome. Second, there could be calls for internal judicial investigation. If undisclosed individuals exerted influence, identifying the source becomes crucial. Judicial independence cannot survive if influence remains hidden and unaddressed. Third, public trust becomes fragile. Nigeria's democratic structure depends heavily on confidence in institutions. When citizens believe that court decisions may be influenced, that confidence weakens. The judiciary is often described as the last hope of the common person. That phrase carries weight because it implies fairness, neutrality, and protection under the law. A perception of compromised independence can create long-term damage. It may encourage skepticism toward future judgments. It may deepen political divisions. It may also affect how international observers view Nigeria's legal system. At the same time, it is important to avoid premature conclusions. Reports must be verified. Context must be clarified. Official statements must be examined carefully. Legal matters require precision, not speculation. The seriousness of the issue demands responsible discussion. Another critical dimension is institutional resilience. Strong institutions are not those that never face challenges. Strong institutions are those that confront problems openly and correct them within legal frameworks. If errors occurred, the law provides mechanisms for correction. Appeals exist for that reason. Reviews exist for that reason. Judicial accountability mechanisms exist for that reason. The movement of Nnamdi Kanu to Sokoto prison after the life sentence added another layer of national attention. It symbolized finality and control. If that finality is now questioned, the legal system must respond clearly and lawfully. There is also a broader constitutional principle at stake: separation of powers. The judiciary must remain distinct from executive and legislative pressures. Any suggestion that this boundary was crossed requires careful institutional reflection. Public reaction will likely remain strong. Supporters of Nnamdi Kanu may interpret the reported admission as validation of long-held concerns. Critics may demand concrete proof before accepting any claims. Neutral observers may call for transparency above all else. What remains constant is the need for stability. Nigeria cannot afford uncertainty within its judicial framework. Legal disputes must be resolved through law, not emotion. Allegations of pressure must be addressed through evidence, not assumptions. If the reported revelation is accurate, the next steps must follow constitutional procedure. If it is inaccurate or misinterpreted, clarification must come swiftly to prevent further tension. This moment stands at a critical intersection between law and public confidence. It demands maturity from institutions, discipline from commentators, and careful evaluation from legal authorities. The issue is no longer only about one ruling. It is about ensuring that the principles guiding Nigeria's courts remain firm, transparent, and protected from undue influence. The immediate question now is what happens next within the framework of the law. When a judgment as significant as a life imprisonment sentence comes under scrutiny due to reported errors linked to pressure, the legal system cannot remain silent. The Constitution and established judicial procedures provide clear pathways for addressing concerns. The first of these is the appellate process. If errors were acknowledged, whether procedural or substantive, the defense team has the right to pursue appeal at higher courts. Appellate courts do not retry cases emotionally. They review records, examine whether legal standards were properly applied, and determine whether any irregularities materially affected the outcome. If pressure influenced the judgment, that would be a serious ground for review. Beyond appeal, there is the issue of judicial accountability. Nigeria's judicial structure includes oversight bodies responsible for maintaining discipline and independence within the bench. Allegations of external influence, especially in a high-profile matter, may prompt internal examination. Such examination would not be about punishment alone but about safeguarding institutional credibility. Institutional credibility is central at this stage. The life sentence delivered on November 20th created a sense of finality in the legal process surrounding Nnamdi Kanu. His transfer to Sokoto prison reinforced that perception. The state had executed a decisive judgment. Any shift in that perception introduces uncertainty. Uncertainty, if not handled carefully, can expand into distrust. Public confidence in the judiciary does not depend on perfection. It depends on transparency and correction when necessary. If there were errors, acknowledging them is the first step. Correcting them through lawful channels is the next. Silence or delay, however, can deepen suspicion. The federal government also faces a delicate position. It must respect the independence of the judiciary while ensuring national stability. Any perception that the executive arm exerted influence would carry serious constitutional implications. At the same time, the government has an interest in maintaining order and preventing unrest. This balance requires discipline in public communication. Clear and factual updates from official sources can reduce speculation. Legal documents, if filed, must be transparent. Proceedings at appellate levels must be conducted with strict adherence to procedural standards. Every step must reflect calm authority rather than political tension. There is also the regional dimension. The case has strong emotional connections within the southeast and among supporters of Nnamdi Kanu across Nigeria and abroad. If the judicial process appears unstable, it can heighten feelings of grievance. Conversely, a transparent and fair review process can help ease tension. International observers are equally attentive. Nigeria's global image includes assessments of rule of law and judicial independence. High-profile cases often influence diplomatic perception. A system that openly corrects errors can strengthen credibility. A system that appears defensive or opaque may face criticism. At the core of this moment is a fundamental principle. Justice must not only be done, it must be seen to be done. That principle guides democratic societies. When serious allegations surface, institutions are tested. The coming period will likely involve legal motions, formal statements, and careful procedural steps. Emotions may remain high, but the process itself must remain structured. Judges at higher courts will rely strictly on records and arguments. They will examine whether any identified pressure altered the fairness of the proceedings. If the appellate courts uphold the original decision, they must provide detailed reasoning that addresses every concern. If they overturn or modify the judgment, they must equally explain the legal foundation for that action. In both scenarios, clarity is essential. This situation also highlights a broader lesson about institutional strength. Democracies are not measured by the absence of controversy but by how they handle it. When institutions are challenged, their response defines their resilience. Nigeria now stands at a sensitive legal moment. The reported revelation has introduced complexity into a case that many believed had reached its conclusion. The path forward must be guided by law, not emotion, by procedure, not pressure, by transparency, not silence. What happens next will shape not only the future of one defendant but also the public's confidence in the justice system. The responsibility lies with the institutions entrusted with interpreting and applying the law. Their actions in the coming days and weeks will determine whether this moment becomes a crisis of confidence or a demonstration of constitutional maturity. The legal community will be watching every filing, every response, and every procedural move. Senior advocates, constitutional experts, and civil society groups are expected to weigh in carefully, not with emotion but with analysis. Their voices may shape public understanding of what is legally possible and what is not. It is also important to remember that court processes can be slow. Reviews take time. Appeals require documentation, transcripts, and structured argument. Patience will be necessary. At the same time, communication must remain responsible. Inflammatory statements from any side could increase tension unnecessarily. Nigeria's stability depends on restraint from political actors, legal representatives, and public commentators alike. In moments like this, institutions are tested quietly, not loudly. The strength of the judiciary will be measured by its adherence to due process, consistency in reasoning, and courage to act strictly within the law, regardless of pressure or public expectation.